So in this video, I'm going to explain why I think New World's territory system is pretty flawed. And I'm going to offer two simple solutions that I think would go a long way to resolve the issues. So first, let's define the problems. Now, I personally really don't mind the war game mode itself. I wouldn't necessarily call it super fun, but at the moment it works well enough. For example, the respawn changes seem to have been pretty effective, and I think it's functioning okay. It's not the war itself that I think is the problem, it's who's getting into the wars that is pretty much the problem. Because at the minute, wars are pretty damn casual, unfriendly, and to some extent that's okay. It's your hardcore PvPers who are getting into these wars, and they're having a lot of fun. Some of them just really enjoy it, and it makes sense. Amazon do seem to be planning on having a queuable war system to probably ease the fact that casuals can't get into the wars, and they'll be doing this probably like a battleground, probably in the same place where you'll queue up for Outpost Rush. But I don't think that is the right solution for two main reasons. One, as I said, I don't think the game mode is actually all that fun on its own. It's really the meaning behind the game mode that is the reason people I think enjoy it. Some of you will actually enjoy it, and that's fair enough. But more importantly, I think it's the philosophy and the game mechanics of the territory control system that is actually flawed, and it should be that which gets fixed. I don't think offering a cheap queuable option is really the best thing. It sort of feels to me like a let them eat cake moment. In my personal opinion, New World should have a system where the hardcore PvP players are concentrating on a smaller group of zones rather than all of the zones. And then it should be left to everybody else to maybe concentrate on the outer rims, maybe Cutlass Keys, Morningdale. Those kind of zones should be essentially left up to the less hardcore PvPers. And if you disagree with that, that's fine, but you run into the problem that we have now. And that's with companies like shell companies that basically only exist so that they can get more declarations and hold more zones because they can hold them at the same time, because they can actually offset the time that the wars are. And it's basically the same group of players always doing the wars, and it's like a recurring loop. The same group of players do the wars, the same group of players then get the best crafted gear because they get the gold, and then the same group of players do the war, and it's just repeat. Now, I personally think that the rewards for Everfall and Windsward are way too high, and I'm just going to keep repeating that until it eventually gets changed. Now, that's not to say there shouldn't be a reward for having the most popular zones. There obviously should. My point is that just the amount of reward is too much, and the difference between your hardcore PvPers and everybody else is way too great. In the dev talk, they spoke about how the economy was in a good place. I just don't necessarily think so. I think the hardcore PvPers only in Windsward and Everfall are getting way too much gold, and they're literally taking that gold from everybody else, and I just don't really like that system. But that's not really what we're talking about here. However, it is the point of the game that the best hardcore PvPers are the ones who are supposed to do the wars and get the reward from it, and that's okay. And you have some players who absolutely love it. They love pushing the influence, they love the open world PvP, they love doing multiple wars per day. Fair enough, I'm not trying to necessarily stop your fun much, and they probably love it because you have meaningful actual rewards behind it, like a lot of gold, and gold is super important in New World. On the other side of the coin, you have people more like myself. I'm a relatively casual player, I'm leading a relatively busy life, I work, I have a wife and kid and stuff like that. I can't play 12 hours a day, and I really want to do wars occasionally. I don't want to be running PvP missions every day, and I don't want to be in a war every day. I want to be maybe one war every week, but I can't really because I am too casual. I actually can, depending on what company you're in, but in general, a lot of people will be in that situation. Now, I personally don't want to be queuing up for a meaningless war where the rewards are non-existent or very minor in comparison. I actually want to be part of the story of the world and the server, because I do like the zone control system. It's just hard to interact with as a casual player. Now, if you don't think that that's an issue, fine, we disagree, that's okay, there's no problems there. You're then likely to be in the top 50 or 100 players who are always in the wars on your faction, and that's okay. I don't really want to take away your fun to give fun to me, but it's not just that there's just me. I feel like I'm part of probably a wider group of players than the hardcore PvPers, which may or may not be true. So I wonder, if there are more of us, what would be the solution to get more of us involved? And I think we have two pretty simple ideas that could help with this, and hopefully it wouldn't overly displease the hardcore PvPers. One solution is something that I've seen many times, and I'm not going to claim credit for it, and that would be to put a simple cooldown on the wars. You'll see people say one war every 24 hours. I think what we mean by that is just one war per day, and it'll reset overnight, because if you made it 24 hours, it means you might not be able to defend your zone. It would be a bit awkward. But 1 war per day sounds reasonable to me. And what would it actually achieve? What would it do? Well, essentially it would stop the same like 100 or so players getting in every single war in every single zone, because the shell companies where they like, oh, even if it's the same day, I'm going to do Windswood now, then I'm going to go to Rework, and then I'll do Everfall, because they're all at different times and they can just do that. And the people on that faction want them to do that because they want control of that zone for their faction, and the company obviously wants the gold. So in theory, having 1 war per day would mean more people are getting in wars, like the variety of people would increase, because if there are multiple wars on the same day, well, you know, if there's a war in Morningdale but there's a war also on the same day in Everfall and Windswood and Brightwood, the Morningdale war would probably be just all the casual players like me, because, you know, there's 200 people on that day all trying to get in a war, and you might not have the numbers for every single zone. In this solution, shell companies would probably still exist to some extent, because it's a little bit easier to get the declare, and that's an issue I personally don't really know how to solve, but this would solve it like a little bit. I don't think 1 war per day would like get loads more people in, but it would get a significant chunk of extra people on some days, and I think that would be positive. And my second solution is perhaps more of a drastic change to the game coding. Wars right now are on a pretty like set schedule. What happens is a war exists, then it ends, and then anybody who's not in the faction that controls that zone, literally they just all go and do world PvP, and it's absolutely chaotic for the most popular zones. For the outer zones, sometimes they actually don't get pushed. It really depends on like the population of your server and stuff like that. And then what happens, one faction will put it in contested, and then they'll have to wait for the invasion, and then they'll declare, and then the war will be like a set day. And it's very hard, if it's like Everfall or Windswood, to pick a day when to attack. It's always going to be immediately contested because the rewards are so great. So it's on effectively a set schedule. So even if a company that was doing it legit without a shell company had multiple zones, it's actually quite difficult to time the war so that they're on the same day at the same time to actually put them under stress. So my solution to this would be to let the attacker pick the day. Maybe give them like 2 or 3 days that they can pick, and that's when the war goes on. And if, say, they don't pick a day, then it just defaults to the last day or something. The idea here is that you as a company, or even as a faction, or multiple factions working together, could try and put like one company under a lot of stress. They wouldn't be able to do all of the wars on the same day because of the cooldown, and you'd be able to get them all on the same day. Basically meaning that more companies will own more zones rather than one company and shell companies owning all of the same zones. Now, it would unfortunately reduce the frequency of wars, because if you're saying the declaration has like 1 to 3 days that you can pick, if you pick 3, then it's going to obviously extend that schedule. So my solution to that would be to actually remove the invasions from the schedule. I think invasions at this point are pretty awkward. They're not that much fun, they're not that enjoyable, and they just get in the way. Some people probably enjoy them, and fair enough, crack on. I would maybe say that you make it so the invasion is at a different time. So maybe your war is at 9 o'clock, maybe you can have the invasion at 7 o'clock, so that, you know, you're not going to be put under stress and the wars and the invasions don't conflict with each other. But overall, my point is that you make these relatively minor changes to the game and the war system, and you just really open up the possibility of these non-hardcore PvPers getting into the wars and having some fun, meaningful fun with meaningful rewards. It becomes way less likely that the same people hold the same zones on repeat, and the less valuable zones open up to them like non-hardcore PvPers. Are my solutions perfect? No, probably not. There's probably some flaws there that I'm just not seeing, but I do think it would be better than what we have now. And you know, those people who really enjoy the war system and they want to do it all the time, well, when we get the queuable wars, you'll be able to have your wish. It'll still have some meaningful PvP for you, and you'll be able to practice in the wars, and the casual players will be able to actually get into some wars. So they're my solutions to the problem. Shell companies on some servers are a massive problem. I haven't really seen them too much, but I do think you get generally the best players always in the wars, because it makes sense, because they're the most valuable content and with the biggest rewards. And then anybody who's sort of not in that group, it becomes really difficult to sort of get involved. You have to sort of like, you know, just get in the right company and hope that they start putting you in. I'd just like to see sort of like progression even in the territory control. The outer zones give you less gold and the middle zones give you more gold, but the outer zones are easier to get and like hold. To me, that would make sense. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.